Are you good to start the episode?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Artful Conversations. Today I'm here with football freestyler, educator, and American WFFA representative Spinny Vinny. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Ethan, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's nice to have you on. I've been wanting to have you on for a while because you have a unique insight on things in the freestyle scene and otherwise. So the first thing I wanted to ask you about was just kind of how you started in general and what drew you to freestyle. Could you tell me about that?
Sure. I would say back about 12, 13 years ago, I was in New York City and there was the Red Bull Street Team, which was a bunch of guys who were kind of street ballers, were kind of
Yeah.
freestylers, or it was a range, but it was more like the Jogo Bonita kind of Brazilian cipher, get into a circle, do a trick, two tricks, and then dish, two, three tricks, dish. And they would do performances around New York City, activations. And I kind of stumbled upon one, probably not even by design. And there were like one or two guys, like Frankie Flo being probably the guy who stuck out the most. And he was 18 or 19 at the time. And I was like,
Okay.
holy, this is like, this is something different. And I felt very much like I had spent a good 20 years playing soccer. And I kind of knew like what my level was and what I could do with a soccer ball. But this was opening like a whole nother realm of like way of being with the ball. And I felt a little intimidated by it and maybe a little bit like I'm too old for this shit. And it was Frankie who was like, yo, like you can juggle, come on in the circle. And that spirit of invitation, bringing people into the circle and kind of affirming you wherever you are, like, oh, I see you can do like a little toe bounce. Like, that's dope. Like, check this out. And then they'll do like a little variation, maybe up it a little. And you're like,
Right.
whoa. And so they're validating what you can do. They're not trying to like show you how good they are, like, oh, I'm going to destroy you. It was more of a, let's have the conversation. And so for about a year or two, that was really my world. Eli, Jairzinho, Frankie, Oscar, Larry, like a bunch of these guys that I would see at like coaches conferences or an activation or an event. And I just wanted to be around it. And so I kind of followed them around. And at some point, I started playing less soccer and
Hmm.
doing more street soccer and freestyle. And I really didn't believe in myself the first year or two. I didn't really think of myself as a freestyler. I was a soccer player who was learning a few tricks. I know there's a lot of people out there that can do a crossover and around the world, a few pancakes, a knee grab, maybe an ankle grab, and they're kind of
Right.
right there. And if they don't have a community or an outlet or something, then they just kind of stay there. So that's where I was.
Yeah.
But luckily I had Frankie Flo as my mentor, and he was about 19 or 20 at the time, and I was like 34 or 35. And we'd walk around and I would tell people that's my teacher. And people were like, what the hell are you talking about? And Frankie would be like, no, 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 he's my teacher. Because Frankie was looking for someone who was
Hmm.
older, who had that coaching, it kind of like knew how to work with kids,
Right.
appealing to him to have someone like that. So we complimented each other. And yeah, man, I kind of owe it all to Frankie Flo, to be honest. It wasn't YouTube that came later, Aka Magazine, Tozani, all that came a little bit
Hmm.
later. I wasn't really influenced. In fact, I kind of hated on the lower culture a bit because it didn't seem so inviting and it was very kind of
Oh
hierarchical.
yeah.
So I was a bit of
Right.
a hater at the beginning. And that was partly like just because a lot of the guys are around, Eli, Jairzinho, they're like, if you can't play soccer, then your freestyle's whack. It was that
Hmm.
kind of like, you can't ball out. You're kind of, they weren't about that. And then later is when I started to understand, listen, man, there are people who just are going all in with certain styles. And that became really dope too. And I started to really appreciate that. But in the beginning, it was kind of street ball, juggling circles, music, vibes. You know, it wasn't later until I realized that the Japanese were kind of doing that same thing, but at a much higher level. But
Yeah.
you know, kind of what drew me in. So I have a soft spot in my heart for a freestyle vision that's a little more inclusive rather than
Right.
exclusive, because that's just where I'm coming from.
No, I agree with your standpoint though, and that's I had Nick on here, Nick Sato, on my first episode, and he said the exact same thing that that Red Bull crew um is what inspired him to start, and that just makes me think how much all these soccer teams should be creating these freestyle crews and stuff like that could open up so many new people to the sport. And I think that what Red Bull's doing is super cool.
Yeah. It's I think the hard thing about selling freestyle as a kind of as a marketing tool for soccer is that on one hand it can feel devaluating, like you're devaluating
Yeah.
or devaluing is the word.
Hmm.
Devaluing the sport in and of itself. You're kind of you're saying like we're trying to use you to kind of promote our team, kind of as entertainers. But on the other hand, I feel like there are so many opportunities for kids who may not know that they are future freestylers that won't get exposed, and that's where a lot of them are.
Right. It's
They're at
kind
soccer,
of
you know.
it's kind of like a symbiotic relationship. Like both parties are earning things from it. You know.
Yeah,
I get what you mean though about the devaluing. As long as you can do it in an earnest way, I feel like it could be healthy.
yeah, and also like part of the conversation about should freestyle like kind of disassociate itself from soccer or football,
Hmm.
or should they become allies? My position has shifted over the years. At first, I was very pro like football and very pro sport culture, and
Yeah.
I saw us coming out of that, Maradona, like coming out of that. And then when I started hanging out with Fahads and the Mick Ricks and people like that, I started to see like, whoa, like Lukey, these are people who are Gautier bringing musicality, acrobatics, flexibility, mobility. Like they're bringing in other corporal disciplines, and it's really enriching freestyle. Like it's making it very unique. If we just juggle the ball with our feet and did some crossovers and some like, you know, it would be like, okay, these guys are just soccer players fooling around. But once you create new movements, handsprings, backflips, J stalls, then you get people's attention in a different way. And people start to see it more as
Right.
art sport. Skateboarding for a long time was just what? It was just there were no waves and you
Yeah.
were spreading concrete. You were surfing. That's it. When Rodney Mullen started doing kickflips, it was like, wait a minute, you can't replicate that on a wave.
Hmm.
So skating went from, like off season for the surfers
Right.
in California to becoming its own thing with its own vocabulary, its own language. And surfers, I'm sure, still see the relationship. Like no one would argue like, oh, skating and surfing aren't related. It's just now they're their own cultures. And I think this will happen with freestyle football at some point, if it hasn't already happened. We have our own language. We have our own
Right.
domain. We don't get jealous of the professional footballers. Like, good for you. And they
Yeah.
look at us like we can't do what you do.
Right. I think that's an interesting parallel. I never thought about that way with the skating and surfing. But that's interesting you bring that up. I touched on the relationship in my little video essay I made um, between soccer and freestyle. You could probably make a whole video essay just on that in itself. But
I
yeah,
mean,
it's
I feel me and Frankie talk a lot about like what should be inspiring freestyle culture, and I feel like skateboarding is a great example because skateboarding didn't have competitions.
right.
It started just like freestyle. It's a zero competition culture. Surfing among the Hawaiians was not structured on modern sport.
Hmm.
Right? So the sports side, the competitions, the money, the events come after this. It's already been established, the culture.
Right.
So that to me is like very different than like, I mean, you could argue maybe that baseball and basketball and these other sports, there was kind of a time when it was play and then it got formalized, and that could be just like the whole history of modern sport. But it was so quick, the transition from guys and girls in their basements, in parks, in alternative spaces, uploading videos saying, yo, check this out, check this out, check this out. And then someone like, hey, let's make a tournament. And then people showed up and be like, dude, this is just an excuse to get together. Like, no one really took the
Yeah.
tournament. Like, Super Bowl, like, the stories I've heard the first few years,
Right.
we were drunk half the time. It was like the party all night, the next day, like, yeah, let's battle. No one took it seriously. Like, oh, I need
Right.
to. Now you go and like Boyka is like going to bed at 10 o'clock and he's drinking water. And like Jesse came to my house 3 weeks ago and he's like, dude, I get up at 5 every day. I go to bed at 10. I don't drink. I eat this food. It's like professional athletes looking
Yeah.
at like, I got a peak in August. Like there's a periodization to my training. Like it's just come
Mm.
full circle. So I feel like skateboarding with Nyjah and with other skaters, they went through the same thing. So I feel like, we need to not pretend like we're the first sport to do this and think that like somehow, like this hasn't kind of already happened. And we need to learn from other sports. Like we need freestylers who are educators, who work in schools, freestyle social workers, people who are doing social justice, people who are doing therapy through freestyle, people who are working with 50-year-old dudes or women trying to just be better human beings, have a practice. We need competitions locally, regional, international, national. We don't need 2 events every year and put all of our money into that and be like, okay, that's freestyle. Red Bull Street and Super Bowl.
Right.
Like that's not going to grow the culture. The
Yeah.
culture will be grown when we realize that the power of freestyle is the power to move people's hearts and to like connect with. You many skaters don't follow like street league? The majority go to a skate park and walk up to a random kid. Hey, name for me 10 professional skateboarders. Like, dude, I just come out here to
Yeah.
be with my friend. We need that in freestyle. We don't need everybody worshiping Erlen and Jesse. Like they're great. And
Right.
like God, but we need people who are like, yeah, I want to hang out with Ethan.
Yeah.
That's why. And that crew. We need crews of friendships. Then I
Yeah.
think
I agree.
when that happens, people are gonna start to take notice. Like, yo, this freestyle thing's real.
Right.
Like I'm trying to start a freestyle club at my soccer club. And then I want to start another one in Brooklyn. And I want Brooklyn and
Yeah.
Manhattan, Bronx to have a meet. Kids, 8 years old, 9, 10, 11, no coaches, just a big meet and
Right.
just freestyle, like ball out. Like that's the way I see it growing. Mikrik has an academy in Poland, in Warsaw, and he doesn't talk about it.
Mhm.
These kids, they love it, man. They love being with each other. I was there. Like I did a performance. I was there with them. It's so powerful when you see kids 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 trying to express themselves through the ball, and they're not thinking about Super Bowl.
Yeah.
They're thinking about their friends, expressing themselves, just learning new tricks. It's very inspiring, and for us to be around it, the guys who have more experience, it also keeps us young and fresh, and connected to like a bigger purpose. You should be thinking the next 30 years, how am I going to impact the culture?
Right.
Where you are. Like, oh, if you're in Texas, boom, you're creating your little spot. You're in Carolina, boom, you're there. You're like, how do you create culture?
Let me ask you this: how so as a educator, as a teacher, how what is your teaching philosophy, and how has freestyle impacted that? What's the relationship between the
Yeah.
two?
I mean, yeah, it's a symbiotic relationship. Freestyle has taught me that the teacher isn't as important as they think they are.
Okay.
I mean, there's a whole culture of kids who learn how to do shit that's unbelievable without a
Right.
teacher.
Right.
So that's number one. Like, kids
Mhm.
don't need teachers to learn shit. That's number one.
Okay.
Second, learning in a freestyle community is very democratic and it's very egalitarian and it's very much based on you for things that you think you need, but people don't tell you what you need. So if you came to me and said, yo, check this trick out, and I see it, I'm like, dude, that's dope. I would love to see you combine that with that. I think that'd be cool. And you're like, all right. But I would never walk up to you and say, you know what, your clipper, your foot, like the crank is not quite right. You should probably like do this, and this.
Hmm.
Bro, that's on you, man. You want to have a clipper that looks like Ama and Ibuki and PWG? Just ask the question how those guys do
Right.
that. They're going to tell you. If you want it, the knowledge is accessible. So that's number two. Making knowledge accessible to people. You can just you can they're free, you can literally just go visit your favorite freestyler, and if you can get there, they'll probably put you up. Like that's
Hmm.
where we are right now with the community. Like literally, people are just putting each other up. Jacob has like been traveling all around the world. He was in Australia just with Jay, like just recently. People just go because they want to get inspiration and they want to learn from other people. So the third thing is creativity and freestyle is still there's still like it still has high status being able to create. And in schools are not always about creativity. Schools are about setting up your day so they can kind of control the flow curriculum and of bodies. So you walk into a school and you go through security,
Hmm.
go through past a school agent. Then you have to check in, can't be late. And then you have your day broken up into periods. And then the learning is supposed to happen in a timely fashion, in an efficient fashion. And there's a facilitator who's ensuring that the learning happens. Schools are good because they give support, they give places of meaning for kids. And like, of course, I work in a school, so it's not all gloom and doom. But schools often kill creativity because let's say one day you come in, you want to work on a trick for 5 hours. They're like, dude, you can't do that in school.
Right.
You got 20 minutes of recess. Go for it.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, I just got warmed up. Sorry. And then you go to a soccer team and they're like, oh, you're not going to play today because you're not the starting 11. You know, whereas in freestyle, I would say, and this is what I use in my classes, I ask kids, what do you want to learn today? Like we're doing dribbling with a basketball.
Hmm.
What would you learn? Do you want to learn how to dribble between your legs, behind the back? Do you want to run and dribble? Do you want to dribble in one spot? Do you want to dribble to the music? Like what would you love to learn? And let's make it happen. And if you can't dribble with one hand, then dribble with two hands. And in freestyle, we tell kids, hey, if you can't juggle yet, try some blocking tricks, try some like knee bounce tricks. Like it's okay. If you can juggle, we say, hey, what's the next thing for you? Oh, you can do one around the world. Try to do two. Try to do around the world plus a hop the world. Try to do like it's the way freestylers go about it is the way I teach. I
Right.
try to find what we call the just right challenge. There's easy peasy, there's a mission impossible, there's the just right challenge. Freestylers get that. So when I bring freestylers to my class and they see how I teach, they're like, dude, this kind of feels like a session a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, that's the idea. It should feel free. The kids should be free to play. Like playing is how we learn. Drills, yeah, some learning can happen, but you can kill the love, the creativity. So when freestylers tell me they're burned out, I usually tell them you should try playing, just playing.
Yeah.
Stop doing sessions where you're doing 45 minutes of lowers, basics, and then midges, and then like stop with the structured training for a bit and play with the ball, play with ideas, play with your friends, get the love back, and then you can go back to training things that you would like to present to the public without dropping.
Yeah. I
You know?
completely agree. That's where I'm at. That's what I've heard you talk about that using the word play instead of like training before, and
Yeah.
that makes it so much more enjoyable and to go out there just when you're inspired, you end up doing so much better and feeling so much better about it.
Yeah, but I have these funny like back and forths with Boyka because Boyka will be like, dude, train. I train.
Uh-huh.
I grind. And
Yeah.
machine grind. And like these guys
And
grind.
they
Pat Shaw
do. Yeah.
grind, right? And I respect it, but Pat's not immune to the burnout. Like,
Mhm.
he's confessed with me, like, dude, I need to like you gotta be careful because they're very motivated people. They're very disciplined. They have clear goals. Like they want to be world champs, right? And it entails a level of training, like real kind of focused training that not everybody's ready for. So I don't mind if you're ready for it. Like, dude, if that's what you want to do and you're ready for that, go for it. Like Nick
Right.
years ago didn't want to train like that.
Hmm.
And now he's like maturing and he's getting a little bit older, you get a little bit older and it's like, you know what? Maybe I want to go for this. So I feel like there are
Yeah.
moments when we need to recognize that we're ready to train. And there are moments when we're really just to be playing. And there are moments when we need to step back and go play some more. There are moments when we need to stop playing and get serious about some shit
Yeah.
so that we like you're gonna go to the Super Bowl and you're not gonna like train some sets unless you're a prodigy, your shit's gonna fall apart on the stage because I've seen it
Right.
too many times. So yeah, training has its place, but I feel like there's a whole generation of freestylers that mostly played, competed a little, and now we have a new generation that are competing more than they're playing. So they're doing the levels higher, like technical levels higher, but the originality and the playful spirit and the spontaneity is maybe not quite what it used to be, in my opinion.
Right.
I never really diss one generation or another. Like sometimes I look back and see some of the stuff people did live, and I'm just like, I can't believe they tried that. And then
Yeah.
I go and see some of the stuff that people do, and I said, I can't even believe that that person can do that, like consistent. It's insane.
Yeah.
Some of Brynard Erlin sets, you're like, dude, what is like? How's it even possible? Even if you know it's coming. The
Yeah.
boy could like three or four, like different three revs in one combo. You're like, dude,
It's insane.
what
He was the first. You were there in Florida at the U.S. Open, that was my first ever competition, and he was the first freestyler I saw on stage because he was the first one to go up in qualification, and that was the first time I'd seen anybody do Palais live, and he just went crazy the whole set, no drops. I couldn't believe it, man.
I mean, Boyka, they say Boyka's been penalized for making everything look so easy.
Yeah, yeah, he
You know,
really does.
judges are like, well, it didn't look like he really even he broke a sweat there. Kazani told me when he was 12 years old, he couldn't combo, like he couldn't do half the worlds. So he ended up
Mm,
doing half around the world. He'd do like a Tazani, and then to continue the combo, he'd just do a crossover and then do another Tazani and do a crossover and then do like an outside around the world.
I
And
remember
outside.
doing that when I started. Yeah.
So it's like he couldn't do the alt Mitches.
Uh huh.
So it's like and it's just crazy. Like he started when he was like 11.
Yeah.
But by the time he was 13, he was doing like no touch combos, crossover no touch,
Yeah.
6-9 combo. But he couldn't do 10 hop to worlds. So like according to like the lower
Oh.
gods, his progression was not right. Like he didn't do the
Yeah.
foundation first. But according to Kazani's like feeling, he was like, I laid down the foundation for my style. And
Right.
so I am unique because of like an accident of age. And then you have like Hugo, who's like doing all polys at 15, and then he destroyed his body because like he skipped some steps there. Like maybe you shouldn't be doing such an explosive movement to your knee when you're still
Hmm.
growing. Like
Yeah.
adolescence is a tough age to do that kind of strength training.
I tore my hamstring learning Palais. Just I guess I didn't. I like you said wasn't prepared enough, and the day after I landed Palais, the whole back of my thigh was purple, and so I couldn't do it for another month. but yeah, I guess
Um,
you have to prepare for that stuff.
no one talks about it. There's no coaches. It's all word of mouth. You
Yeah.
can watch the freestylers. I encourage people always to watch the trajectory of freestylers and try to understand the impact of their training. Like
Right.
Luca destroyed his body. Greatest
Hmm.
lower freestyler ever.
Of course. Yeah.
The last few years that I used to see him in Super Bowl, if he went last year, the previous years, I would just be like,
Hmm.
Luca, what's going on? He's like, bro, I'm injured most of the time.
Hmm.
Like I get uninjured for a bit, I land some shit, and then I just get injured again. So he was doing a lot of shows and work with like the Italian freestyle crew to make money. But he's like, I'll never be able to go back to those days where I could just train injury free for long stretches of time. It happens. I've met people who are like, I've been training for 2 years. I never met another freestyler. I'm like, man, this is
Yeah.
like backwards. And
That's
sometimes
me.
it works.
That's what happened with me. It was 5 years before my first competition. 3 years before I even met another freestyler. Yeah.
And props to you. I just what I would say to you, I would say go to Super Bowl or
Yeah.
go to the community,
That's
visit
the
people,
next step.
or just visit. Like if you came to New York and
Yeah.
like, hey, I need a place to crash for 2 days, we would find a place for you. But
Yeah.
you gotta show up. And then once you hang out and you see like, oh, Frankie actually he still lives a freestyle life. He's either training, playing with his kid, nutmegging kids, emceeing events. Like you get to see what actual
Right.
freestyle looks like. It's not just tricks.
Right.
Of course, some people will disagree with me a little bit,
Hmm.
but I feel like the freestylers who are living their life from the freestyle perspective, or the rock climbers from the rock climber perspective, or the parkour people from parkour perspective, it's not like a 2 hour window out of 24. It's literally 24/7. And it just expresses itself differently. Like if you saw, I start my classes with trick of the day, and I take a hat and I try to do a hat trick. I take a pole and try to bounce it on my head. I take my phone and I try to clipper it into my pocket. Like this is my trick of the day. And I'm just telling the kids like trick of the day is you finding a challenge out there in the world
Right.
and putting it out there. That's it. It's not whether you land it or you don't land it. It's thinking like a freestyler. So the freestylers who will, you know, juggle any object or freestyle with any object. Dude, Mick Rick, I remember Mick Rick one time was staying with me. It was like 1:30 in the morning. We had a few brewskis. And this guy tried to do like a no touch combo in the middle of the street. And I'm just, dude, he almost stepped on the ball. This was like a week before Super Bowl, a week before he won Super Bowl.
Man.
I was like, I literally had to grab his ball from him. Like, dude, do not do this. No, no, no. I just want to land this one no touch. I'm like, no, no, you're going to kill yourself. Bro, this is like one of the greatest freestyle athletes of all time.
Yeah.
Trying to land combos on a slanted hill in the middle of a street at 2 in the morning in New York City while he's on vacation. That's
Yeah.
the real culture. So when people are like, yeah, like I train from 6 to 8 every day, or I do this every day, and I'm like, that's the starting point. Like
Right.
you have a good start, you're going to what's tangible. But I think when you start hanging out with freestylers and you start to see like, oh, there's a culture behind it, and that's what I think keeps people in the culture. At least for me.
All right. Let's do some rapid fire freestyle questions. Ready?
Good.
Okay. Favorite freestyle trick?
Uh, Probably pancake.
I knew you were gonna say that. I like that too.
I was gonna say flipper, and then I'm like, no.
Yeah. Favorite freestyler?
Uh, Probably Kazani. Make great Kazani. It's hard to
Yeah.
say. One
Best
of my.
battle you've ever seen?
Ooh, I think I think it was maybe Brynjar Lukey Super Bowl.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
It was top like 64. It was or top 32 maybe
Yeah.
before they like the last battle to get into like the main event. And everybody pretty much Lukey hadn't been around or whatever. I don't know. It was like Lukey was like on a comeback trail and he just was on fire. And they both were.
You mean the one
And
where he beat?
the crowd was going crazy. Like
Yeah.
people couldn't believe that it was as close as it was. And when Lukey won, it just people just lost it. Like some people were just
Right.
in disbelief because they're like, no, like the Brynjar was definitely like, and he was in ascent big time.
Right.
And Lukey was kind of old school Polish favorite. It is just a lot of things came together. Like people started taking sides, and it
And
was just amazing.
every time they battle, it's crazy. I was talking about the one where Brynjar ended it with the Jordan stall. He rolled it to the neck flick and then the around the world no touch. That's the one I was talking about. But every time they battle is
Yeah,
crazy.
this one Lukey won in like a 3-2.
Yeah.
It was really controversial. I
Favorite
loved it.
Favorite competition at Super Bowl?
Um, yeah, it's hard to say. Like, it's always been about the battles. Like, the energy is usually the greatest in battles, but I kind of I like the routines.
Okay.
When Nick won,
Yeah.
I was like so amped for him, and I love the genre because
Hmm.
um I feel like the musicality and the creativity and just the emphasis on like what I think freestyle should be anyway. It's in routine. It's kind of like that is the criteria. So over the years, routine has more and more. The first few years, it was like the battles was like what everybody talked about, but the last few years, it's the routine for me that I really like. So,
That makes sense. Um, Most underrated freestyler.
whoa, whoa. I would say Pixie.
Oh, that's a
Pixie
yeah.
to me is like he he's made like such an incredible contribution to
Hmm.
uppers, the transitions. I mean, him and Genki, but Pixie like musicality, style, just everything about Pixie's freestyle for me is unbelievable. The only thing I think that the reason why he's underrated is because in battles, it's very difficult for him to reproduce. Like Fahad is a little bit like that
Yeah.
too. Reproduce his best stuff like in very concentrated. So he doesn't win as much as someone who trains for battles. But of course, that doesn't take away
Right.
from me. He's like, he's like a soul freestyler.
Uppers, lowers, or sits?
You know, I think that um I feel like that question takes us back to like an era when those three categories were more easily distinguished. I feel like
Yeah.
it's more hybrid now than so I would have to say that um for me the future will always be in how do you create freshness.
Three more questions. Favorite freestyle video?
I guess it has to be like a Mick video.
Yeah,
The
that's
most
mine.
recent the glitch one was just
Yeah. Who do you have next world champion?
man, you know, all my heart and soul is like pulling for Patrick,
Yeah, of course.
just because just a lot of reasons. Like,
Hmm.
I met him when he first started freestyling. He came to US Nationals and he was like 15. He was doing like backflips every set. He did a backflip catch. I'm like, bro, you can't do 8 backflip catches in one. But I would say Patrick, Jesse, and then of course Boyka is like a homie that we go
Hmm.
way back. And I would love to see him. It's something he's wanted for years and he's come so close.
Everybody deserves it. Last one. What would you say your biggest accomplishment in freestyle is?
I'd say my biggest accomplishment is teaching freestyle soccer in a New York City public school as part of the curriculum
Yeah.
with it's just like to me it's like I feel like I'm the first person to ever do that in New York City. Theon came to my school like 6, 7 years ago,
Awesome.
did a show, and I showed him our class, like how we incorporated freestyle. He's like, "There's nothing like this in France." Like I've never, I couldn't. He just couldn't believe a public school like during the regular school day. I mean, France is really like crazy, like creative culture outside of institutions, but inside they're like
Yeah.
so like by the book. It's crazy. He was just shocked, and I didn't think of it as
That's
a big deal,
awesome.
but I was like, man, thanks. That means a lot. So I would say that's the biggest thing, other than like repping people my age, people who are in their late 30s, early 40s, going to their 50s. Like, guys, like you don't have to compete to win. You can just
Yeah.
be a part of the community.
I think we about hit the time. I'm gonna ask you the same thing I ask everybody else to finish it off. Just shout out 3 or 4 artists anybody of any discipline, because this show is about promoting artists. So
Yeah.
tell the viewers, somebody at home.
Well, I think number one, I got to shout out my wife, who's a flamenco dancer. She's a really like high level
Awesome.
flamenco. She's an amazing artist, and it's hard when you have kids and you're married many years, and like you kind of get. I don't get to see her perform as much anymore or whatever. But she's been 25 years dancing flamenco, and I've met a lot of great artists through her, the flamenco community, the music community, guitarists, singers, dancers. So she's been a big influence on me, and like I'm lucky to be surrounded by that energy. Frankie Flo is my mentor, and so he's like anyone who wants to meet like a real artist who's doing it and everything he does. Like Frankie Flo for me is number one, and Jason Lindner played with David Bowie's last album right before he died, and he's a good friend, and I've been watching him perform since 1997. For 26 years, I've been watching this guy evolve as an artist, and he's on another level. It's really moving, and so I always look to the artist for the inspiration. I feel like as freestylers, we have that right. Like we earned it. We earned the right to call ourselves artists and to look to the artistic community for inspiration, for support, for validation. You should never, if you're a freestyler, you should never walk into a room and be ashamed to say like, yeah, I'm an artist.
Definitely. Thank you all for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll take your comments into consideration. Peace.